There is something about this moment in your life, Virgo, that feels like standing at the edge of a doorway you have walked past 100 times before. But this time you are finally ready to step through. The conversation that clears misunderstandings, the one this reading is centered around, is not just about words exchanged between two people. It is about a shift in how you see yourself, how you allow others to see you, and how you finally stop carrying the weight of things left unsaid. If you have been feeling tension with someone, if there has been a fog of confusion sitting between you and another person, or even between you and your own inner voice, this is the moment that fog begins to lift. But here is the thing most people miss. Clarity does not always arrive because the other person finally explains themselves. Sometimes clarity arrives because you stop telling yourself the wrong story. You stop filling in the blanks with fear. You stop assuming the worst when silence stretches too long. And that is exactly where this energy is taking you. Not into a dramatic confrontation, not into an argument that leaves everyone exhausted, but into a grounded, honest exchange that finally puts things where they belong. You are not someone who avoids truth, Virgo. You never have been. But you are someone who sometimes holds truth so tightly inside your own mind that it never reaches the people who need to hear it. That pattern is breaking right now. And what comes next is going to surprise you, not because it is shocking, but because it is simpler than you expected. Stay with me through every single section of this reading, because the details build on each other, and the last part ties everything together in a way you will not want to miss. Tip 1. The first thing you need to understand is that this conversation has already begun, even if no words have been spoken yet. Energy moves before language does, and you have already been sending signals, Virgo. The way you have pulled back slightly, the way your eyes have changed when a certain topic comes up, the way your silence has grown just a little heavier in recent weeks. All of that is communication. The other person has noticed. They may not have said anything about it, but they have felt the shift. And here is what makes this moment so important. They are not pulling away from you because of it. They are actually leaning in, trying to figure out what has changed, trying to understand what you are carrying that you have not yet put into words. This is rare, Virgo. Most people run from tension. Most people avoid the discomfort of not knowing where they stand with someone. But whoever this energy is connected to, they are not running. They are waiting. And they are waiting because, on some level, they already know that what is about to be said needs to be said. Now, here is where your natural tendency can either help you or hold you back. You are someone who processes everything internally before you ever let it out. You analyze, you weigh, you consider every possible angle. That is a gift. But it can also become a trap when you overprocess to the point where the moment passes. You rehearse the conversation so many times in your head that by the time you are ready to have it, the emotional charge has faded, and you convince yourself it is no longer worth bringing up. That cycle is what has kept certain misunderstandings alive for far longer than they needed to be. The energy right now is pushing you out of that cycle. It is not asking you to be reckless with your words. It is not asking you to dump every unfiltered thought onto someone without care. It is asking you to trust that you can speak honestly and still be received with grace. That is the piece you have been missing. You have been so focused on getting the words perfect that you forgot the most important part of any meaningful conversation, which is the willingness to simply be present in it. Perfection is not what heals misunderstandings. Presence does. Vulnerability does. The willingness to say, I do not have this all figured out, but I want to figure it out with you. That is what opens doors. And I can feel very strongly that the door you are standing in front of right now is ready to open. The person on the other side is not your enemy. They are not waiting to judge you or dismiss what you have to say. They are waiting because they, too, have been carrying something that needs to be released. This conversation is not one-sided. It is a mutual unburdening. And when it happens, you are both going to feel lighter than you have in a very long time. But you have to be the one who goes first. That is the role the universe is asking you to play right now. Not because you are weaker for doing so, but because you are strong enough to handle it. Going first is not a sign of desperation. It is a sign of courage. And courage, Virgo, has always lived inside you, even when you did not recognize it by name. So stop waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is the one you choose to create. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the energy surrounding this conversation is protective. It is held. It is supported. Whatever you have been afraid of hearing back, the reality is going to be far gentler than what you have been imagining. Tip 2. The second layer of this energy is about the specific misunderstanding that needs to be cleared, and I want to go deep here because this is where most of the emotional weight is sitting. The misunderstanding is not about a single event. It is not about one thing someone said or one thing someone did. It is about a pattern that has been building over time, a slow accumulation of small moments where meaning was lost in translation. You said something and it was heard differently than you intended. They did something and you interpreted it through a lens that was shaped more by your past than by the present moment. Layer after layer, these small distortions stacked on top of each other until the gap between what is real and what is assumed became wide enough to cause genuine pain. And here is what I need you to hear clearly, Virgo. Neither of you is the villain in this story. That is the most important realization that is trying to land right now. Your mind has been subtly building a case the way it always does, organizing evidence, sorting through memories, trying to determine who is right and who is wrong. But this situation does not have a right or wrong. It has two people who care about each other, or at the very least two people who matter to each other, who have been seeing the same situation through completely different windows. You have been looking out your window and seeing one landscape. They have been looking out theirs and seeing another. And both of you have been frustrated because you cannot understand why the other person does not see what you see. The conversation that is coming is not about convincing them to look through your window. It is about both of you stepping outside and standing in the same open field for the first time in a long while. That means letting go of the need to be understood exactly the way you want to be understood. It means accepting that their experience of the situation is just as valid as yours, even if it feels completely different. This is hard for you, Virgo, because accuracy matters to you. Details matter. You remember exactly what was said, exactly when it was said, and exactly how it made you feel. And you are not wrong about any of that. But memory is selective, and emotion colors everything. The version of events you have been holding on to is true for you, but it is not the only truth in the room. When you sit down with this person, or when the moment naturally arrives for this exchange to happen, I want you to lead with curiosity instead of certainty. Instead of saying, "This is what happened and this is why it hurt," try asking, "I want to understand how you experienced that moment because I think we may have been seeing it differently." That single shift in approach changes everything. It takes the conversation from a courtroom into a living room. It takes it from a debate into a dialogue. And dialogue is where healing lies. The misunderstanding that has been sitting between you and this person is not as solid as it feels. It is made of assumptions, projections, and gaps that were never filled with actual information. Once you start filling those gaps with honest words and genuine listening, you are going to realize that most of what you were afraid of was never actually there. The monster under the bed turns out to be a shadow, and shadows disappear the moment you turn on the light. That is exactly what this conversation is. It is you turning on the light. Not aggressively, not with a spotlight meant to expose or blame, but gently, the way you would light a candle in a dark room. Just enough to see each other clearly again. And once you see each other clearly, the path forward becomes obvious. It is not complicated. It is not dramatic. It is simply two people choosing to stop guessing and start knowing. That choice is available to you right now, and the energy around it is warm, supportive, and deeply healing. If what you're hearing feels accurate, imagine what could happen if you applied this energy intentionally for 21 consecutive days. That's exactly what the 21-day program in the pinned comment is built for. Daily guidance, focused direction, and real momentum. If you're tired of staying in the same cycle, this is your structure. Tip 3. Now I want to talk about something that might catch you off guard because this third layer of the reading goes deeper than you might expect. The conversation that clears misunderstandings with another person is actually a mirror for a conversation you need to have with yourself. And I do not mean that in some vague, inspirational way. I mean it literally. There is a misunderstanding happening inside you, Virgo, between who you are and who you have been pretending to be. Not pretending in a dishonest way, but pretending in the way that people do when they have been adapting to their environment for so long that they forget what their original shape looked like. You have been bending yourself to fit what others need from you. You have been softening parts of yourself that are actually sharp on purpose. You have been dimming qualities that are meant to shine because somewhere along the way, someone made you feel like your full brightness was too much. That is the internal misunderstanding. You have been telling yourself a story that says, if I show all of who I am, people will leave. If I speak my full truth, it will be too heavy for others to hold. If I stop managing everyone else's comfort, the whole structure falls apart. And so you have been carrying this invisible weight, this constant negotiation between what you actually feel and what you think is safe to express. This conversation with the other person is going to crack that pattern open, because when you finally speak honestly to them, you are going to realize something that changes everything. You are going to realize that the world does not collapse when you tell the truth. People do not shatter when you set a boundary. Relationships do not end when you stop performing and start being. In fact, the opposite happens. The relationships that are real get stronger. The connections that are built on honesty deepen. And the ones that were only surviving because you were doing all the work, those fall away. And their falling away is not a loss. It is a release. I know that is hard to hear, especially if one of those connections is someone you love deeply. But love that requires you to shrink is not love. It is management. And you are tired of managing, Virgo. You are exhausted from being the one who keeps everything running smoothly, while your own needs sit in a drawer marked later. Later never comes unless you pull it into the present. And that is exactly what this energy is doing. It is pulling later into now. It is saying the conversation you have been postponing, both with this person and with yourself, cannot wait any longer. Not because there is a deadline, but because you are ready. Your soul is ready. Your heart is ready. Even your body is ready, because I would not be surprised if you have been feeling physical tension, maybe in your shoulders, your jaw, your stomach, that is directly connected to everything you have been holding in. When you finally let these words out, when you finally stop rehearsing and start speaking, that tension is going to release in a way that feels almost miraculous. You are going to take a breath that feels like the first real breath you have taken in months. And in that moment, you are going to understand why this conversation had to happen now. Not a year ago, not next month, but right now in this exact chapter of your life. The timing is deliberate, Virgo. The universe does not waste moments like this. Every delay, every hesitation, every almost conversation that did not quite happen, all of it was preparation. You were not being punished by the wait. You were being shaped by it. And now you are sharp enough, clear enough, and grounded enough to say what needs to be said without losing yourself in the process. Tip 4. Let me take you into the fourth layer of this reading, because what is emerging here is something deeply connected to how you handle trust, and more specifically, how you rebuild it after it has been damaged. The misunderstanding that sits between you and this other person has a root, and that root is tangled up in trust that was either broken, tested, or slowly eroded over time. You did not wake up one morning and decide to stop trusting them. It was not a single moment that shattered everything. It was a slow leak. A series of small cracks that you noticed, cataloged, and filed away in the back of your mind. Because that is what you do, Virgo. You notice everything. You catch the micro-expressions that other people miss. You hear the slight shift in tone that tells you something is off, even when the words sound fine. You register the moments when someone's actions do not quite match their promises. And you store all of it. Not because you are looking for reasons to doubt people, but because your mind is wired to seek consistency. When something does not add up, it bothers you on a level that goes beyond logic. It bothers you in your gut, in your instincts, in the part of you that knows things before you can explain how you know them. The problem is that this incredible ability to detect inconsistency has been working overtime, and it has started flagging things that are not actually threats. Your system is overloaded, Virgo. You have been running your internal alarm system at maximum volume for so long that now even small, harmless inconsistencies trigger a full alert. Someone forgets to text you back and your mind jumps to they are pulling away. Someone cancels plans and the story immediately becomes, they do not value me. Someone says something slightly different from what they said a week ago, and suddenly you are building a case for deception. This is not a flaw in who you are. It is a survival mechanism that has outlived its usefulness in this particular relationship. At some point, maybe in a past connection or maybe even in childhood, you learned that inconsistency was a warning sign. And it was in that context. But this context is different. This person is different. And the conversation that is coming is going to help you see that. When you sit across from this person and hear their side of things, you are going to realize that many of the inconsistencies you flagged were not signs of dishonesty. They were signs of someone who is imperfect, who is figuring things out in real time, who does not always have the right words at the right moment. Just like you, just like all of us. Trust does not require perfection. Trust requires pattern. And the pattern with this person, when you look at it honestly without the filter of hypervigilance, is one of care. It is one of effort. It is one of showing up, even imperfectly, even clumsily, even in ways that did not always land the way they were intended. The conversation is going to soften your edges around this, Virgo. Not in a way that makes you naive, not in a way that lowers your standards, but in a way that allows you to receive love that does not come wrapped in a perfect package. Because perfect packages do not exist. And the longer you wait for one, the longer you keep yourself from the real, messy, beautiful connection that is right in front of you. This is the layer of the reading where I need you to be really honest with yourself. Have you been fair in your assessment of this person? Have you given them the same grace you would want someone to give you? Or have you been holding them to a standard that even you could not consistently meet? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones. And the fact that this reading is bringing them up tells me that you are ready to sit with them. Tip 5. The fifth thing I want to bring to your attention is connected to the words you choose and the power those words carry, because this conversation is not just about what you say. It is about how you say it, and even more importantly, what you leave space for after you have spoken. You have a gift with language, Virgo. You are precise. You are articulate. You can construct a sentence that cuts straight to the heart of a matter, while everyone else is still fumbling around the edges. But that precision, as powerful as it is, can sometimes work against you in emotional conversations. Because when you are too precise, when every word is measured and every point is made with surgical accuracy, the other person does not always feel invited into the conversation. They feel presented to. They feel like they are receiving a verdict rather than participating in a dialogue. And that is not your intention. I know it is not. You do not want to lecture. You do not want to overwhelm. You want to connect. But the way your mind organizes information can sometimes create a wall instead of a bridge. So here is what the energy is guiding you toward for this particular conversation. Instead of coming in with a prepared statement, come in with a prepared heart. Instead of knowing exactly what you want to say, know exactly how you want to feel when it is over. That shift in preparation changes everything. When your goal is to feel connected rather than to feel understood, you naturally leave more room for the other person. You ask more questions. You listen longer before responding. You allow for pauses that would normally make you uncomfortable. And in those pauses, something beautiful happens. The other person feels safe enough to say the thing they have been holding back. They feel safe enough to be honest because you are not filling every silence with your own words. Silence is not emptiness, Virgo. It is an invitation. And in this conversation, the silences might be the most important part. What the other person needs from you is not a perfect explanation. It is the feeling that you genuinely want to hear them. Not just the parts that confirm what you already believe, but all of it. The parts that surprise you. The parts that challenge your version of events. The parts that make you uncomfortable because they reveal a blind spot you did not know you had. Everyone has blind spots, and the people who love us are often the ones who can see them most clearly. That is not a threat. That is a gift. But it only works if you receive it as one. If you go into this conversation with your defenses up, ready to counter every point, ready to explain away every piece of feedback, you will win the argument but lose the connection. And I do not think that is what you want. I think what you want, what you have wanted for a long time, is to be truly seen by this person. Not the curated version of you, not the competent, put together, always in control version, but the real you. The one who worries, the one who doubts, the one who sometimes lies awake at night wondering if they are enough. That version of you is not weak, Virgo. That version of you is human. And when you let that version into the conversation, something shifts at the deepest level. The other person stops seeing you as someone who has it all figured out and starts seeing you as someone who is just as vulnerable, just as uncertain, just as in need of reassurance as they are. And that is where real intimacy lies. Not in perfection, but in shared imperfection. Not in having all the answers, but in being willing to sit together in the questions. This conversation has the potential to take your connection with this person to a level it has never been before. But only if you let go of control long enough to let it happen naturally. Tip 6. Now we move into a layer that I think is going to resonate with you on a level that surprises even you, because this sixth section is about the role that forgiveness plays in clearing misunderstandings, and I am not just talking about forgiving the other person. I am talking about forgiving yourself. Because here is what I have been sensing throughout this entire reading, Virgo. Underneath all the analysis, Underneath all the careful processing and the meticulous reconstruction of events, there is a quiet, persistent voice inside you that keeps whispering, maybe this is my fault. Maybe I caused this. Maybe if I had said the right thing at the right time, none of this confusion would have happened. You blame yourself more than you let anyone see. You replay moments in your head, not just to understand them, but to punish yourself for how you handled them. You zoom in on the one sentence you wish you could take back, the one reaction you are not proud of, the one moment where your frustration got the better of you and you said something sharper than you meant to. And you have been carrying that regret like a stone in your pocket, turning it over and over, feeling its weight every single day. But here is what you need to understand. That moment, whatever it was, does not define you. One imperfect response in a sea of thoughtful, caring, intentional actions does not erase everything else. You are not measured by your worst moment. You are measured by the full picture, by the pattern of who you are. And that pattern is one of someone who cares deeply, thinks carefully, and tries harder than most people ever will. The forgiveness you need to extend to yourself is not permission to repeat the mistake. It is permission to move past it. There is a difference. Holding on to guilt does not make you a better person. It makes you a smaller one. It makes you hesitant, guarded, afraid to speak up because last time you spoke up, something went wrong. And so you shrink. You pull back. You decide that silence is safer than risking another misstep. But silence is what created the misunderstanding in the first place. Your silence was not a gift to the other person. It was a wall. And walls do not protect relationships. They suffocate them. The conversation that is coming requires you to walk in with clean hands and a clear heart. That means putting down the guilt before you sit down. That means forgiving yourself for not being perfect, for not always knowing the right thing to say, for being human in a world that constantly asks you to be more than that. When you forgive yourself, something extraordinary happens to the way you communicate. You stop being defensive because you are no longer protecting a wound. You stop over-explaining because you are no longer trying to justify your existence in the conversation. You simply show up, open and honest, and you let the words come from a place of wholeness rather than a place of apology. The other person will feel this shift immediately. They might not be able to name it, but they will sense that something is different about the way you are engaging. You are not armored. You are not braced for impact. You are just there, fully present, fully willing, fully ready to hear whatever comes, and to respond from a place of love rather than fear. That is the version of you that heals this misunderstanding. Not the version who has all the right words, but the version who has done the inner work of releasing the weight they have been carrying. And Virgo, you have been carrying it for far too long. Put it down. You have earned the right to walk into this conversation unburdened. You have earned the right to speak without apologizing for taking up space. You have earned the right to be heard without first proving that you deserve to be listened to. You already deserve it. You always have. Tip 7. The seventh layer of this reading brings us to something that many people overlook when they think about clearing misunderstandings, and that is the role of timing. Not just the timing of the conversation itself, but the timing of everything that led up to it. Because nothing in your life happens by accident, Virgo, and the fact that this misunderstanding emerged when it did, and is being resolved when it is not random. There is a larger pattern at work here, one that connects this moment to a much bigger chapter of your growth. Let me explain what I mean. If this misunderstanding had been cleared 6 months ago, you would not have been ready. Not because you are incapable, but because you had not yet learned what this period of confusion was designed to teach you. Every misunderstanding carries a lesson inside it, and the lesson this one carried was about patience, about sitting with discomfort without rushing to fix it, about trusting the process even when the process felt unbearable. You have been in a season of being stretched, Virgo. Emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, you have been pulled in directions you did not choose, asked to grow in ways you did not volunteer for, and pushed to confront parts of yourself you would have preferred to leave untouched. That stretching was not punishment, it was preparation. And now that the preparation is complete, the resolution can arrive. Think about it this way. If you try to have a conversation before both people are ready, it does not matter how right the words are. They will not land. They will bounce off armor that has not yet been lowered. They will hit walls that have not yet been softened. Timing is not just about when you speak. It is about when both people are in a state to truly hear each other. And that state for both you and this other person is now. Something has shifted in the energy between you, and even if you cannot point to a specific moment when it changed, you can feel that the air is different. The tension that used to feel sharp now feels more like a dull ache, which means the acute phase is over and the healing phase has begun. Your job right now is not to force the conversation to happen on a specific day or at a specific time. Your job is to stay open and recognize the moment when it naturally presents itself. Because it will. It might come through a text message that opens a door. It might come through an unexpected phone call. It might come through a moment of shared silence where both of you realize that the only thing standing between you is a conversation neither of you has been brave enough to start. When that moment arrives, do not overthink it. Do not ask yourself if the timing is perfect. The timing is perfect because the moment exists. Trust that. Trust yourself in it. Trust the other person enough to believe they can handle whatever you need to say. And trust the universe enough to believe that it would not bring you to this doorway if you were not ready to walk through it. The beauty of divine timing is that it accounts for everything. It accounts for your fears, your doubts, your past experiences, your patterns. It does not ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be willing. And willingness, Virgo, is the key that unlocks everything. You do not need to be perfectly prepared. You do not need to have every word mapped out. You just need to be willing to show up as you are and trust that as you are is enough. Because it is. It always has been. Tip 8. The 8th section of this reading takes us into territory that is directly connected to what happens after the conversation, because clearing a misunderstanding is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. And the new story that is trying to write itself in your life right now, Virgo, is one of deeper authenticity, richer communication, and a level of emotional honesty that you have never fully allowed yourself to experience. Let me be direct about this. You have spent a significant portion of your life being the person others need you to be. The reliable one, the organized one, the one who always has a plan, always has a solution, always knows the next step. And those qualities are genuinely part of who you are. They are not masks, but they are not the whole picture either. There are parts of you that are wild, spontaneous, uncertain, messy, and deeply emotional in ways that would surprise the people who think they know you. Those parts have been living in the shadows, not because they are shameful, but because you never felt safe enough to let them out. After this conversation happens, after the air is cleared and the misunderstanding is resolved, you are going to find yourself standing in a new kind of space. A space where the old rules do not apply anymore. The rules that said you had to be perfect. The rules that said vulnerability was weakness. The rules that said asking for help was a failure. Those rules kept you safe for a long time, but they have also kept you isolated in ways you are only now beginning to recognize. The new chapter that is opening requires new rules, and those rules are going to feel uncomfortable at first because they ask you to do things that go against every instinct you have built over the years. They ask you to be seen before you are ready. They ask you to speak before you have the perfect words. They ask you to trust before you have enough evidence. But here is what I want you to hold on to, Virgo. Discomfort is not the same as danger. Just because something feels unfamiliar does not mean it is unsafe. Your nervous system has been trained to equate vulnerability with risk, but that training came from a context that no longer applies. You are not the person you were when those defenses were first built. You are stronger now, more grounded, more self-aware. And the people in your life right now are not the same people who made you feel like you needed those walls. Give them the chance to prove that. Give them the chance to show up for the real you, not just the version you have been carefully curating. I know that is terrifying. I know that the idea of being fully seen without filters, without edits, without the safety net of having everything perfectly in order, makes something inside you want to close this reading and go organize a drawer instead. But resist that urge. Stay here. Stay open. Because what is waiting for you on the other side of this conversation is not rejection. It is recognition. The other person is going to see you, really see you, for perhaps the first time. And instead of running from what they see, they are going to move closer. They are going to say something that lands in the deepest part of your heart and makes you realize that you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who were not enough for you. That era is ending. The people who belong in your next chapter are the ones who can hold all of you, not just the convenient parts. And this conversation is the doorway into that chapter. Some people watch, others transform. If you want to be in the second group, the 21-day guide in the pinned comment gives you a clear step-by-step process aligned with your sign. This isn't about waiting, it's about moving. Tip 9. The 9th layer of this reading is something I have been holding back until now because I wanted to make sure you were ready to hear it. This part is about the other person's perspective and what they have been going through on their side of this misunderstanding. Because while you have been analyzing, processing, and quietly carrying the weight of unspoken words, they have been going through their own version of the same struggle. And their version might look very different from yours on the surface, but underneath, the core emotions are remarkably similar. They are afraid, Virgo. Not afraid of you, but afraid of losing you. Afraid that this distance between you has grown too wide to bridge. Afraid that they waited too long to say what needed to be said, and now the window has closed. They have been replaying moments in their head just like you have. They have been waking up in the middle of the night with conversations running through their mind, practicing what they would say if they had the courage to say it. They have been watching you from a distance, trying to read your energy, trying to gauge whether you are still open to them, or whether you have already made up your mind. And here's the part that might surprise you. They think the misunderstanding is their fault, just like you think it is yours. Both of you are sitting in separate rooms, holding the same guilt, pointing the finger at yourselves while assuming the other person is pointing it at them. It is almost poetic how parallel your experiences have been, and yet how disconnected they have felt, because neither of you has had the courage to share what is really going on inside. This is why the conversation matters so much. It is not about who was right or who was wrong. It is about both of you realizing that you have been fighting the same battle from different sides. You have been protecting yourselves from each other when what you actually need is to protect each other with each other. The other person is not your adversary. They are your ally. And the moment you both recognize that, the misunderstanding does not just get cleared, it gets transformed into a source of strength. Because now you have a shared experience of navigating conflict, of choosing honesty over avoidance, of being brave enough to say the uncomfortable thing in service of something greater. That shared experience becomes a foundation, something you can both point back to in the future and say, remember when we went through that difficult time, and we came out the other side stronger? That memory becomes evidence that your connection can withstand pressure. It becomes proof that your bond is resilient. And resilience, more than passion, more than compatibility, more than any other quality, is what determines whether a relationship survives the long term. You and this person are building resilience right now, even if it does not feel like it. Every moment of discomfort you have endured, every night of overthinking, every wave of anxiety about how this will turn out, all of it has been strengthening something between you that cannot be broken by misunderstanding. The connection is still there, Virgo. It never left. It just got buried under layers of assumption and fear. And this conversation is going to clear those layers away like wind clearing fog from a valley. When the fog lifts, you are going to see the landscape that was there all along, beautiful, intact, waiting. And you are going to wonder why you ever doubted it was still there. But you did not doubt because you are weak. You doubted because you care. People who do not care do not worry about misunderstandings. They just move on. The fact that this has kept you up at night, the fact that it has occupied space in your mind and heart, is proof of how much this connection means to you. Tip 10. The 10th and final tip in this section of the reading is about what you carry forward after all of this unfolds, because this moment is not just about resolving one misunderstanding. It is about changing the way you approach every conversation, every relationship, and every moment of tension for the rest of your life. I know that sounds like a bold statement, but I mean it completely. What you are learning right now, through this specific experience, is a skill that most people never develop. You are learning how to hold space for complexity, how to sit with the fact that two contradictory things can both be true at the same time, that you can be hurt and still be wrong about why, that someone can love you and still disappoint you, that a relationship can be deeply valuable and still require difficult work. These are not simple truths, and most people spend their entire lives avoiding them. They want things to be clear-cut. They want someone to be the hero and someone to be the villain. They want a simple story with a clean ending. But life does not work that way, and neither do you, Virgo. You are built for nuance. You are built for depth. You are built to see the full picture, even when the full picture is messy and uncomfortable. That ability is your superpower, and this experience is teaching you how to use it with greater wisdom and less self-destruction. Because in the past, your ability to see everything also meant you carried everything. You took on the full weight of every complexity, every contradiction, every unresolved thread, and you tried to process it all alone inside your own mind. That approach worked up to a point, but it also exhausted you. It isolated you. It made you feel like no one else could understand the depth of what you were dealing with. But here is the shift that is happening right now. You are learning that you do not have to process everything alone. You are learning that sharing the weight of complexity with another person does not make you weak. It makes you wise. It makes you connected. It makes you part of something larger than yourself. The conversation that clears this misunderstanding is teaching you that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is the highest expression of it. And as you carry that lesson forward, every relationship in your life is going to benefit. You are going to communicate differently. You are going to listen differently. You are going to show up in conflicts with a groundedness that comes from having walked through this fire and survived. Not just survived, Virgo, but emerged transformed. The person who walks out of this conversation is not the same person who walked in. And that transformation is permanent. It does not fade when the emotional high wears off. It does not disappear when the next challenge arrives. It becomes part of who you are, woven into the fabric of your character, available to you in every future moment when courage is required. You are being upgraded right now, Virgo. Emotionally, spiritually, relationally. This is one of those pivotal moments that you will look back on years from now and recognize as a turning point. The moment when you stopped running from honest conversations and started running toward them. The moment when you stopped letting fear make decisions for you and started letting love lead instead. That moment is now. And everything that comes after it is going to reflect the choice you make in it. There is something I want to leave you with, Virgo, something that ties together everything we have moved through in this reading. And I want you to sit with it, not just hear it, but actually feel it settle into your body, into your bones, into the part of you that knows things without needing proof. You are at a crossroads. Not the kind of crossroads that comes with flashing signs and obvious choices, but the quiet kind. The kind that shows up disguised as an ordinary day, an ordinary moment, an ordinary conversation that turns out to be anything but ordinary. The misunderstanding you have been carrying, the one that has made your chest tight and your thoughts restless, is not a problem to be solved. It is a doorway to be walked through. And on the other side of that doorway is a version of your life that feels lighter, clearer, and more honest than anything you have experienced in a very long time. I want you to think about what your life looks like when you are no longer spending energy managing unspoken tension. Think about what becomes possible when the space in your mind that has been occupied by worry and rehearsal, and what if scenarios is suddenly freed up for something else. For creativity, for joy, for the kind of deep rest that only comes when your heart is at peace. That is not a fantasy, Virgo. That is what is waiting for you on the other side of one honest conversation. One moment of courage. One decision to stop waiting for the perfect conditions and start creating them. The universe has been lining everything up for this moment. Every challenge you have faced recently, every emotional wave you have ridden, every night you spent staring at the ceiling wondering if things would ever feel right again. All of it was bringing you here, to this moment, to this decision, to this version of yourself who is finally ready to speak and be heard. You do not need anyone's permission to have this conversation. You do not need a guarantee that it will go perfectly. You just need the willingness to show up and be honest. And I know you have that willingness because you are still here. You listen to every single word of this reading, which tells me that something inside you recognized the truth in it. That recognition is your confirmation. That feeling in your chest, the one that is part fear and part excitement and part something you cannot quite name. That is your signal. That is the universe saying now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel ready, because you will never feel fully ready. Now, the conversation that clears misunderstandings is not just about fixing what was broken. It is about building something new on a foundation of honesty that did not exist before. It is about proving to yourself that you are capable of the kind of emotional bravery that most people only admire from a distance. And once you prove that to yourself, there is no going back. You cannot unbecome the person who chose courage over comfort. You cannot unlearn the lesson that vulnerability is the fastest path to connection. You are changed, Virgo. Whether you have had the conversation yet or not, you are already changed by the willingness to have it. Now go make it happen. Go say the thing that has been sitting in your throat for too long. Go open the door that has been waiting for your hand on the handle. The other person is ready. You are ready. And the universe has already cleared the path. You have two options after this video. Close it and hope things shift. Or decide that the next 21 days will be different. If you choose the second, the structured 21-day transformation aligned with your sign is waiting in the pinned comment. The energy is already moving, the only question is whether you are.